Welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to take a look at the new Venue 8.0 software. With me today is Chris Lambrechts, our application specialist, Alex Hostrand, our new product manager, and I'm Champ Peck, market development manager for Avid Live Sound. We're going to be looking at Venue 8.0 and some of the new features that will be coming early next year. Just a little disclaimer. Some of these features may drop. Some of these features there may be new features added to this as well, or some of the features may move around a little bit in the software. So with that, let's take a look at the new features coming with Venue 8.0. One of the features is VCA metering and monitor bus metering. Alex, do you mind explaining this to us? What it is, what it's about, who's been asking for this?
Yeah, well, the big thing is, like, I believe as an engineer, having visual feedback at a quick glance is helpful, in the heat of battle, as it were, and especially with things like VCAs where you're controlling massive amounts of channels all sort of like gang to one fader. Having that information at a glance is very, very helpful and like gives you a relative idea of like how that VCA is affecting all of those members. So for monitor bus metering, we took a very simple approach of basically showing you whatever is hitting that monitor bus when you have it, soloing, whether it's your default mix to monitors, any of those things. When it came to VCA meterings, we had to think a little creatively of how we wanted to show that, because in a state where you have, 30, 40, different inputs all being controlled by a VCA, you can't just sum all of those inputs together and, give yourself a meter based on that, because it will just be completely clipped out. So we went with the aspect of always showing what is the highest value of any given channel inside of that VCA, and then affected that meter value relative to the VCA position. So basically, you're always getting a at-glance view of like what your VCA is, what the loudest thing on your VCA is, and how it is affected by VCA, by the VCA level.
That's awesome, man. Chris, can you show us an example of this?
I can sure try. I'll bring up the Venue GUI for this. So basically, I'm on a layout here where I'm showing a bunch of VCAs over here. So there's a drum VCA, percussion VCA, bass, guitar, keys, etc., etc. And then here over on this end of the layout, we have a bunch of drum inputs. We have a bass, some guitars, keyboards, and some saxophone players as well. And if I start my virtual sound check, you will see metering on the inputs. And as soon as I open up one of these channels, so I'm going to open up these drum channels, and you can see that the drum VCA is starting to meter, right? Same with the bass. I'm opening up the bass. And as Alex was saying, this goes together with the VCA control. So if I start controlling the VCA, you can see that metering go up and down as well, right? So that's basically what VCA metering is all about. So back over to you, Chant.
All right, that's great. So a new feature we have is any mixed monitors. We have two solo buses, an A and a B bus. So Alex, with that, can we actually route different things into the A and the B bus now? And how do we do that? And we'll have Chris give us a little example once he's done.
Yeah. So we designed this feature because a lot of engineers sort of have been talking about wanting to have that specific mix just always there for their monitor bus. And currently the only way to really do that was solo, because the only mix to monitors that was able to be used was left and right. So we took sort of like that request from engineers and expanded the ability to assign any group output to be the default mix to monitors for both monitor A and monitor B bus independently, as well as the ability of adding the ability to change that via events. So Chris, why don't you show them a little bit?
Sure. Back to my Venue GUI, and we're on the buses page, and monitor A, monitor B. Currently mix to monitors is turned on. But mainly what Alex was saying is that I can, by default, the mains is assigned to mix to monitors, but I have a drop-down menu available now that will allow me to assign any bus, group, matrix, aux, to the mix to monitor bus. And as Alex was saying, I can actually attach events to that. So I have a bunch of mix to monitor events here, which basically are a couple of function switches. So the trigger is a function switch, and then my actions is a list of things. First, I'm going to turn the mix to monitors on, and then I'm going to select what group output I want to assign to that mix to monitor bus, and then attention that as well. Right. So here's an example. If I hit function key 7, you can see the event actually trigger. Go back to my buses. It has now changed to drums. If I go to function switch 8, you can see that it flip-flops to percussion, and I can go on and switch to any of the programmed events I've done and turn mix to monitors back off as well. So back to you, Champ.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chris. So you're touching on the events, and with events, these are macros that you can create using virtually any fader, switch, knob, a foot switch, MIDI commands, GPIO, etc. on the console to use them as triggers, and they'll fire user definable actions. And that's kind of what Chris was just doing there, but we've actually expanded upon them even more so. So this is an incredibly powerful part of the console. Alex, what have you done there? What have you added, and how does it work?
Well, so basically, one of the things that I hear when I talk to engineers that use SXL is that they love our event system, and they love how flexible it is, how it allows them to really create exactly what they need. But there's always some things that we're missing. One of them was a feature that we released not too long ago, which was a optionable toggle, which was VCA's trim, aux sends, and sends on faders, which is a very, very helpful tool, but not all the time. So with Venue 8.0, we decided to take everything that was in the options section of the GUI and add it basically as a action or a trigger, depending upon the necessity of it, and expose that for the user and allow them to be able to create that. So now a user could create, a function switch, kind of like what Chris was just showing, that specifically toggles on that VCA trims, aux sends, and sends on faders. So you can have that very powerful tool when you need it, but not have to be digging through a menu to turn it off and on for that specific timing when you want it. We also went through and looked at the entire sort of base event structure of like how we had it laid out, which was, 8 actions, 8 triggers. And we took a look in the software and we asked ourselves, like, why are we limiting, events to be this way? And we couldn't really find a good reason. So we decided to expand it. So now in Venue 8.0, a single event can have up to 128 triggers and 128 actions. And then we were like, what can make building events easier? Sometimes there are like very tedious events. Like I know I have one where I like to be able to have my gates from my drums very quickly able to like toggle off in like based upon group sections. So I'll have like, color switch of group kick, toggle my gates from my kick drums. And now we have a new feature called Smart Duplicate, which you can duplicate either whole events, just triggers, or just actions in a smart way where Venue will look at the structure of your event and try and formulate the logical next iteration of that event. So for me, in my case, if I have like group 1, color switch controlling, my gates, if I smart duplicate it, it would then propagate that to be group 2 color switch and then try and fill in those gate members. But Chris, do you want to show some of the new event stuff?
Sure. For this one, I'm going to use a combination of camera and Venue GUI. So a typical one for monitor engineers is to set up a bunch of triggers. I'm using function keys here. You hit that trigger and it enters your input channels into sends on faders. So function switch 1, I want to go into sends on faders on my fader banks for aux 1. So what does that look like? I'm hitting function switch 1, gives me sends on faders, right? If you want that for multiple auxes. Traditionally, you would duplicate that and then go to the new event, double press, edit this, go to function switch 2, and set this one to then jump to aux sends on faders modes. You see, and this is already becoming a very tedious process. If you have to do this for multiple auxes, very time consuming, right? So I'm going to delete that one and instead use Smart Duplicate. Smart Duplicate, there's a drop down. If I just hit Smart Duplicate, notice that there's a shift. So I can also just hold down Shift on my keyboard, hit Duplicate, and now it has Smart Duplicated my event. Function switch 1 has become function switch 2. Sends on faders for aux 1 has become sends on faders for aux 2. I can keep doing that a couple of times, and whenever I do that, it'll just increment both the trigger and the action. And now, if I go back to my camera overview and I hit those function switches, I can toggle between these different auxes in sends on faders, right? So this is a Smart Duplicate example of the actual event. You Smart Duplicate the event and the triggers and the actions within that event. We can do that within an event as well. For example, what I've set up here is a trigger that will, for what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a group of focals. The group of focals, I want to turn, at some point, I want to use a trigger to turn those focals up. And I've set this for channel 65, which is Violet, one of the singers. And I want to turn her fader up over a course of 1.5 seconds up to 0 dB, right? What this looks like on the console, if I hit that trigger, is like this. You see that first fader who fade up. But I have more singers in that group. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to Smart Duplicate this event. I can do the same thing, hold down Shift and Smart Duplicate. And you see that immediately this jumps to channel 65. I can do that again and jump to channel 67. I went from channel 65 to 66 to 67. Smart Duplicate again to 68. I can actually speed up things and do a multi-selection, and it'll do consecutively everything for that entire group. Notice that in the meantime, I'm hitting my previous limitation of 8 events. I can select all of this again, Smart Duplicate this again. It'll bring me all the way up to Healy, which is actually my last focal. And if I now go back to the console view and I hit that same trigger, it'll do it for all 16 focals in that group.
All right, Chris, that was awesome. Thank you. So while we're looking at the GUI, do you mind showing us a few of the nuggets that have been added as well, starting with the aux master?
Sure. So what I have selected here is an aux master with some members in it, labeled from 1 to 10. I'm actually on my console. I can show you this as well. I'm actually on my console in sends on faders. So if I move these faders up for these members, you will see that these have now values of send levels. So if I turn everything down again, individually, you will see that the members now have their actually send value next to them. Another cool nugget is that I can flip things, every member within the group, and set those members to pre and post. So currently they're switched to pre, and I can just flip them back to post, flip them back to pre, right?
That's awesome. And then if we take a look at a group master,
Sure.
we can see some cool little things going on there as well.
Recall another little snapshot here, which is called groups. And then I go to my layout for that one. So here I have a layout again with an aux master. The aux master actually is colored red. Here's my members. If I wanted to color all those members the same color as my group master, I can do that from the aux master drop-down menu and then just copy color to members, and that will copy all the colors to.
That's nice. Quick and easy. And then another thing we've added in the options page is the mix bus configuration that expands upon a little bit. our ability to drive groups and auxes and whatnot. So let's have Alex jump in and talk a little bit about this and why this has been changed up.
Yeah, so one of the things, very similar to the events and us like looking and being like, why do we design this originally in the first place this way? And if there was a logical change that we could make with it. One of those things was the fact that you could always never have less than 8 auxes or 8 groups, which on smaller engine format sizes could hamper a user when it comes to, having enough auxes for the show, or if it's somebody who doesn't rely on auxes, having enough groups for their show and for all of their bus routing. So now dynamically you can have all of your available mix buses be groups or all of them be auxes. It's completely up to you. You can take groups down completely to 0, or you can take groups up to completely 100% of whatever the value of the engine is provided, as Chris is showing here.
That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, a lot more flexibility there for sure. While we're talking about groups and workflows within a group and auxes, you and Valentine have done a lot of work on the CKM specifically and accessing different members. And can you walk us through that a little bit? And Chris, show that for us?
Yeah. So one of the big things about, having a surface in front of you is being able to quickly get to what you need. And when digital consoles first came out, the biggest gripe that everybody has is like menuing after menuing after menuing just to, get to that one send that you need, or that one option that you need, or, a fader buried, 3 layers deep. So that becomes a real big problem when you start looking at, juggling, 96 output groups, or, if they're auxes, if they're groups, if they're, even just trying to manage, a matrixing of sends for a matrix. So we came up with an interesting idea of creating a sort of easy sort of almost chapter selection, is sort of how I was talking about it in development, is if you press, a designated mix button, you'll go to, your what you would normally see, a mix 1 to 32 mixes. If you press that same mix button again, you will then pop into this chapter selection mode where you can basically see all possible sort of banks of your auxes or groups or members or matrix sends, and be able to select and quickly go to that. And then on top of that, we basically made it so mix 1, mix 2, mix 3 have a history to them. So whatever you leave them on, it will remember next time you go back to that on that single press. So Chris, why don't you show a little bit of that?
Sure. This is just inputs channels. It's showing the default view for this, which is sort of your channel strip view. Once I select the channel, that CKM will be assigned to that channel. So I'm selecting a channel here. And as Alex was saying, if I press mix 1, it gives me now the option to jump straight into any of my aux sends or my groups. If I wanted to go to aux sends 33 to 64, I just tap that aux send. If I go to another page, it'll assign that to groups if I wanted to. And as Alex was saying, it'll remember that choice by by switching between these different modes. If I select a different channel, it will stay in that mode, right? Can go back to there, quickly jump to auxes 1 to 32 or 65 to 96, and so on and so on. So back to you.
So one of the other cool things that you've added is the expanded group view. So if we look at an input channel, maybe Alex, if you'd talk a little bit about that and the thought behind this.
One of the things is having like the ability to see all of your groups or members or anything like that. So we basically looked at how the original expanded aux view was designed for input channels, and we made a duplicated view for the groups, making a very easy tactile way to assign groups using the external GUI. And Chris can show that a little bit.
Let's go back to the Venue GUI for this. I can see that this input channel, it's part of the drum, so it's going to the drum bus. The expanded view that Alex was talking about for the groups, if I open that up, I can see all the groups that I'm currently using, right? So an easy way of doing this is just an example. If I wanted to take these and send them to 2 groups, I could just send them to 2 groups, right? Very easy way and very convenient way of seeing what the groups are labeled like as well, as opposed to these abbreviations that you have here, right?
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So now we're getting into some hardware. Alex, we've expanded the virtual sound check capabilities of the system, done a lot of work there, and we're adding the ability to do a dual purpose MLM 192 card. That's our Milan card. Can you speak to us a little bit about what that means for us going forward?
Yeah. So I've sort of talked about this. Like I have gone through and talked to a lot of engineers, and one of the biggest downfalls of our system right now was we support 192 input channels on our stage ring, but our virtual sound check was only limited to 128 channels, whether it was via MADI or via AVB. So on the easy side of that, we are expanding virtual sound check from MADI to be able to use up to all 4 MADI cards that you install into an engine. And so that was easy, but we also wanted to do something to still allow that ease of that single cable AVB with Venue Link Record that we have coming off of the console for the console AVB entity. So I took a look at the MLM 192 card that we have from Milan, and I worked with my engineering team, and we figured out that we could give it sort of a little bit of new life, a little bit of new purpose. And we've created basically 2 identities for it. One, the MLM Milan compliant identity that we have shipped with and, is Milan compliant. And now you actually have what we call AVB-HD, which is a higher density version of the console AVB entity coming directly off the engine from that card. And because we're coming directly off of that MLM card, and not through the console loop, it allows us to have more bandwidth so we could, increase the channel count. And with that happening, we decided to sort of restructure the way that setting up virtual sound check and like assigning which hardware devices for redundancy, which one's going to be your playback, which one's going to be your record. And so we sort of streamlined that whole system to make it very useful for a user to see it, know exactly, what's recording and what you have assigned for playback. So Chris can show off a lot of that.
So I'm on the options devices page here. I've selected my Milan card, and you can see here in the settings that I can toggle that between Milan. It will ask for a restart. I'm not going to do that. It will ask for a restart to change profiles. I'm not going to do that now because I've already set it to be an AVB HD card. So as Alex was saying, as a Milan card, you will see it pop up in Hive. You can connect to stuff like a P1 or any Milan compliant devices. As an AVB HD card, you can use it as an entity, as an AVB entity, just like the C port, which is over here. If you have a Pro Tools system connected to it, you can hook it up to the C port. Just like the C port, you can now use the AVB Milan card for this. Probably some of you have already seen that this end of the systems page changed as well. So I'm in edit mode. I'm going to use that Milan card. If I wanted to use that Milan card for playback and record, in other words, for virtual sound check, I could tick here virtual sound check here, use that as my playback device as well, actually have between the console AVB and the AVB HD, maybe have a backup there as well and record both. But I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm going to use it as a playback only device. For that, I will now have to jump to one of my computers. And actually, if I open up the audio MIDI setup here, you can see that I'm using the AVB HD card as the core audio device. And actually in Pro Tools, you will see that in my playback engine, I have selected that card to be my playback engine, right? So back to the audio MIDI setup, right? So currently that entity is set to 128 by 128, and Alex already hinted to it. If I go into configure device and select that device, I can bump that IO count up to 144, 168, 192, all the way up to 216 by 216 at 96K, right? Dante Virtual Sound Card is 32 by 32 at 96K. I'm using this as a playback device for, playback for a band, for sequences or whatever. I can have higher channel counts, right? I'm currently using a session which has 42 IO or 42 outputs into my session. If I hit play and then go back to my Venue GUI, you can see that on my sequences page, there's all my sequences, right? How are these patched? They're patched in to the Milan card. If I go to the patch bay, here's my Milan card and here's what's patched into it, right? So there's AVBHD for you.
One of the things that I also forgot to mention is because we're adding this new functionality to the Milan card, we've also decided to allow multiple Milan cards in a system, up to 2, given on certain engine types. So for 144 engines and above, so 144, 192, you'll be able to install 2 MLM 192 cards. So you could have one dedicated as a Milan networking card and the other dedicated as AVBHD, or both in AVBHD, one for playback, one for virtual soundcheck, or just both in Milan mode, because you have a complex networking structure to route your audio.
That's awesome. There's a lot of flexibility you can have now with that. That's great, guys. All right, so finally, we're getting to a long-awaited request from engineers, and that is the Automixer. So I will let Alex kind of take this over and explain a little bit about this, how it works, what it's based upon. If you look at on the GUI, it's pretty much a single button push. What other parameters are there? And let's see what you got to say.
Like Trent was saying, automixing has become like a very useful tool, especially in corporate-based events and house of worship. And it's been something that's been lacking in our system, even, with external, like using plugins, like there's not really a good solution for it in the architects. So we took the basis idea of a auto mixer, which is sort of a pre-fader send to a bus and sort of mixing based upon the metering value, the original sort of idea around it, and implemented that directly into the base audio engine and put it on every single group in Venue, depending upon your show file size and what your group configuration is. If you happen to be using a 192 engine and have 96 groups, every single group in that 90 out of those 96 will have an auto mixer dedicated to it. With that way that we've implemented, we've sort of have a global sort of attack and release, sort of like the breadth of how quickly the auto mixer picks up and lets down as it's chasing different channels around. And we were able to keep it sort of that simple because we decided to leverage other aspects of Venue to sort of incorporate the deeper abilities of a traditional auto mixer. So things like weighting, we decided to take Venue bus to bus routing to be able to allow the auto mixer to work for itself. So a great example is in a corporate event, you have a group of 4 panelists and you have a moderator. So what we could do is take those 4 panelists, route them to group 1, have an auto mixer running on that first group, and then route that group directly to group 2, where also we have the moderator running to group 2 and turn automix on that group and send that to our LR. And what we've created at that point is basically 4 panelists being automixed to themselves that are then weighted differently against the single moderator that their entire summed output of automix is going off of. So we've created that sort of like weighting environment just by leveraging what we have already created in Venue.
That's cool. Chris, do you mind showing where this is found in the software and the parameter changes?
Sure. I am on the auto page just to show what Alex was saying, the global setting for attack and release, the amount of dB that will be released per second there. And then on outputs, as Alex was saying, here's 2 groups of vocals. I can turn Automix on, I can turn Automix off. Actually, on a personal level, I've been playing with this on backing vocals. I've created a couple of days ago, I was playing with a drummer. I just put the toms for the drums in there, and instead of using gates on that tom, I used the Automixer. And actually, it gives you a very natural cleanup of all your tom mics or of all your backing vocal mics. So it's not only for corporate. I think this is going to prove very, very useful in music mixing as well.
Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback from the Venue beta testers around that, where not just, using it in a talking head aspect, but things like backing vocals, things like tom mics, and other sort of like very more musically based ways of implementing Automixer, which is kind of the reasoning around like why we wanted to keep it so simple. So you could then leverage it with the power of Venue to really have it be a creative tool, not just sort of a like surgical tool as it's like normally used.
Yeah, I can imagine in like orchestral, work as well, just where you can have different sections. Could be huge. All right, so looks like we've come to the end of the features that are going to show up as of today in Venue 8.0. Again, just to kind of mention this, we are showing beta software. It's possible things could be dropped. It's possible things could be added. Things could move a little bit around, move around a little bit in the software as well. So with that, look for, this software to come out when, Alex? Do you have a timeline?
So yeah, we have a timeline. We're sort of slating for sometime in Q1 of 24 for Venue 8.0, and there's sort of a lot more
25,
work
you
to be.
mean?
Oh yeah, sorry. Wow.
It's all
My
good.
year is just gone. But yeah, 25 is when we're looking for it. And there's still some more things that I'm trying to squeeze into it to really make sure that it is something sort of, that there's something in there for everyone, which I'm super excited for.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool features in it for sure. So stay tuned. Look for your, software to be dropped in your active Avid account. Right now, we're going to go to some live Q&A, and hopefully you guys have some good questions for us, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, cool. So we did get some questions coming in. Let's start with those. One of them, Alex, is can we use the same existing Milan card that we currently have for the expanded Milan options?
Yeah. So the way that it was designed is that with the firmware update in Venue 8.0, your current existing Milan card that you have will be able to have this dual identity mode where it is Milan or the AVB HD.
Very cool. And along with that, are we still at 128 channel count on the AVB record off the back of the console? On the C and the
Yes.
D port.
So for the C and the D board for the console, just due to the fact that that carbon has other channels flowing through it, we have sort of like that a hard limit to have that be limited to 128 channels. But like Chris showed in the demo section, the AVB HD entity mode off of the Milan card can go from 128 by 128 at 96K all the way up to 216 by 216 at 96K.
Got it. And then along with that, can it be dual Milan as well for a backup? So I think we answered that, but yeah. So if you want to just talk about, again, just kind of recover how the two Milan cards could be used.
Yeah, so in a 144 and a 192 engine, we are expanding the ability to use two Milan cards in an engine. So each of those Milan cards can be set agnostically. So both of them can be set in that Milan mode. Both of them can be set in the new AVB HD mode, or you could have a one in Milan mode and one in AVB HD mode.
Cool. Very cool. Getting back to the Automixer, are there control parameters for each of the groups while using the Automixer?
No. It is basically using the algorithm has been built into the audio engine, and that's our way of sort of like keeping it as simple and our ability to allow it to be able to fit inside of the audio engine as itself. So you basically have an on and off per group, and then you then at that point have your entire group channel flow to make other changes that you want, EQ wise, dynamics control wise, have plugins and at that point, and then dynamically using bus to bus routing, do things like automix weighting.
Cool. All right. Let's see what else we got. Can I have different mixes assigned to monitor A and monitor B? Going back to, yeah, go ahead.
For mixed monitors, yes.
Yeah,
So each monitor A bus and monitor B bus can both be set to a different default mix to monitor bus. So you could have one being, your aux1, and then monitor B bus being, your group 1 or a matrix output.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, lots of actual questions coming in now. I'm just kind of
Awesome.
going through what I can here. Let's see. Can I control the auto mixer through events?
Yes, there are a few events, a few event hooks that we've created in there. One is the ability to globally control the attack and release, and then as well as the on and off state for the auto mixer is both an action, so you can turn it off in a event, or you could use it as a trigger, so turning on the auto mixer does some other action.
Cool. Here's a great one as well. In Pro Tools, when using AVBHD as the interface, can we still use the PT button in the input channel to toggle between input and live mode or stage input?
Yes, as long as the AVBHD card is marked as recording and in the virtual soundcheck setup, it will function as identically as it would if it was the AVB that was off of your console IO.
Very cool. Let's see here. Again, lots coming in now.
Yeah.
Is there a cost for the new software? There we go. The Venue 8 software.
It will be a part of like our normal cost structure, which is active Avid support plans. And that's kind of where we're sitting right now with that.
Okay. Cool. I think there's still a lot more here, but what I will suggest we do, because there's so many that are coming in now, is if you guys have more questions, you can reach out to us directly. There's going to be an email address coming up here at the end of this thing. You can reach out to us. We'll get them to the right people to answer them for you. And please stay tuned and look for more coming from Avid Live Sound. Anything to add, Alex?
No, I just want to say thank you all for coming today and being a part of this webinar and live Q&A. And I'm excited for everything that's coming with Venue 8.0 and everything that's coming in the future for Venue. And I hope you guys stay tuned to see what we have coming.
Yeah. Thanks again, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.